Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea with AmericanScouser.com. And I always have the coffee, but we might have the Polish Prince be joining us actually on Monday morning. So it'll be interesting to see what he's rocking first thing in the morning. I have Green and Loving It going this morning with Kermit because it is freaking Friday. Green and Loving It. Thank God it's Friday. More than that, thank God the freaking transfer window is closed, is basically where I'm at right now with this whole thing. So we'll be talking mostly about that. There's no pre-match tomorrow because most of the US will be lucky to be awake and up for the kickoff tomorrow. So we figured people will still be sleeping. Alan is with us. Good morning, Alan. So we'll talk about a little bit about the game tomorrow as well, but let's mainly talk about yesterday. Obviously, we closed with nothing else. When we left, it was more like, will there be anything else? Arthur Melo was not official yet yesterday morning. Obviously, it is now. I still stand by what I said yesterday. I see it more as a Henderson replacement than anything else. I think it's basically we got all these injuries. We need some kind of reinforcements, and I think it's the closest thing to Henderson in some ways. In terms of what he brings, what he does, the biggest question will be the pace. We'll be able to keep the pace of the game, not necessarily his pace, but otherwise, I mean, dude was in Barcelona, so he's going to be good in like technically he's going to be more than good enough, and it's a quality player. I do like the buy option that was added initially when the news came out. There was no buy option; it was just a loan. So I do like the fact that I think it's like what is it, like 32 or something like that for the buy option. I think that's a pretty darn good deal if we like what we see, and we're talking about an off season where we're going to need 2 to 3, maybe 4 midfielders based on who leaves, who stays, if Keita is resigned or whatever by then. But either way, we're gonna need at least 2 to 3, because Ox is not. I mean, Ox is not gonna get resigned, right? Let's just right. I mean, let's make that a rule that it doesn't happen with the injury records, unless he's coming in like a $5 a week or something like that. But so that's would be good business if that was done. Um, he could be one of those deals where you like what you see. He's only 26, so you get him for like 30 million, and I think that's a pretty darn good deal if you can get a midfielder that you like and somebody who can do what Henderson does. Because Henderson is not getting any younger. Not in terms of like leadership and all that kind of stuff, but more about switching play, doing all those things that Henderson does that kind of goes unnoticed by most. But it's a huge part of the game, especially when we're at home. And obviously the work rates. So that's going to be the biggest thing to see. I mean, we wanted a body, right? We were like, we have to get somebody in. Is it a name that's I know like people are looking at the injury record and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be hard to find a 26-year-old midfielder that has not had injuries. I mean, um, I don't think it's as concerning, and he is kind of like more of an insurance. He's available now, and that's really all we care. In what are we talking about? In like 3 weeks over here, we're gonna have a lot more of the guys back, and that's what we gotta do is just hang in there and get to that part. And you look at I was looking at it actually like yesterday. In terms of like how long do we have to hang in there with the midfield we have now and the pieces we have now. Obviously, guys are starting to come back. I don't know if Jota made the practice yesterday, but he was supposed to be back this week. Not for playing, but at least for practice. And so we have obviously the Derby game on Saturday. Then we go away to Napoli, Wolves at home, Ajax at home, Chelsea. And then we have the international break, nothing till October 1st. And by then, we're hoping the majority of these guys are going to be back. At least key ones where our center backs will be back, our Thiago will be back, Jota will be back. And that's, those are the key things right now. The rumor, I mean, basically what Klopp is saying about Keita, and there you go, which is Keita just confirmed by Klopp is out indefinitely with a muscle injury. I mean, I don't know what this guy's muscles are made of, but I still feel like there's something else going there. It was such an odds the way it's happened. I don't know. It'll eventually come out. Maybe I'm just being paranoid or cynical, whatever you want to call it. But it just was, I don't know. The way it just went down is odd. So at the end of the day, after all is said and done, the summer transfer window is done and over with. Thank freaking God. So after all this, we brought 4 players in Carvalho, Nunez, Ramsey, and Melo. Obviously, so we'll talk about who we brought in and how we like that. But 99.5 million spent on those guys. And players who have left are Sadio, Taki, good old Divock, Nico, Grujic, Ben Davies, if he was actually a real person, Ojo, and Karius. So, and then that's basically 72 out. Net spend this window is 27. Alan actually sent me this morning, kind of like a brief summary, hoping it's accurate, but in terms of like numbers, I should say. But incoming wise, I think we have not seen Ramsey yet. I mean, we've seen clips of him, and some people actually have seen him play as well if you're following the Scottish League. But I think, I mean, in Carvalho, I think we have like a huge gem, and we kind of knew that. We watched him for a long time now. I know I have when he was at Fulham and stuff like that. I think we got something there. I mean, I'm not like just saying that because he scored this goal in the 98th minute. But even when he comes and play, one thing I really like, I talked about this yesterday in terms of like not only the way he talked after the game and the things he said are very mature for a kid his age, and the way he can kind of still compose himself, and that was very impressive to see. But if you look in the game, when you look, I watched like toward the last 10-15 minutes of the Newcastle game last night, and because it's things I do. But yeah, you looking at the game and you look at Carvalho, he comes in on like the 70th, I believe it was. But the way he plays then for a guy who came in to make something happen, to help make something happen, he still plays within the system. He does not do things where he's over trying to make something. He's still playing within the system. But the goal he gets, the situation he gets into, kind of shows that he's that guy that's going to make those runs into the box, and he's going to make something happen. He can kind of like sense things where ball is going to be. That's kind of like, that's a sense thing that's very hard to explain in soccer, where certain players just know where to be. And sometimes you have these guys who scored a bazillion goals, and you look at all their goals, it looks like, well, what, they're all freaking, most of them are like tap-ins, but the guy has the sense to be there. I always tell the story about Ian Rush. When you used to watch Rush, I mean, I remember, and those days, people, the cameramen weren't that as good, or the camera angles maybe weren't that as good, but like I remember a shot going to a goalie and bouncing off, and there's nobody else on the screen, but you just knew the next guy to show up on the screen was going to be Rush, and he was just going to tap it in. And yeah, that's a tap in, but you got to be there. You got to anticipate that. I mean, that's one thing I think Divock had. He didn't have a lot of other things like drive and stuff like that, unfortunately, because I really think he had that, and that's why he got those goals. He had a sense of where to be. He had a sense of expecting the worst, like in that Everton game, and being there. That's just like a sense a player has. I don't think that's something like, I don't even know if that's something that can be taught. It's just a feeling. They're like, this is where it's going to go, and you kind of like go there. So Alan says, I send Thiago back in training next week. Keller is getting closer, something to do with age and growing. I don't know. We're way past that, Alan, ourselves. So, and Konate back during the international break. So we just got to make it there. We're just going to make it an international break, because Thiago back in training next week and stuff. Pretty much, I would take it as he's not going to play Chelsea game, maybe. But I don't see him. Like, I can see a scenario where he comes in on that Tuesday against Ajax, plays like 20 minutes or something like that, and starts the Chelsea game. That's, I think, for somebody who just came back, and he was a hamstring as well, wasn't he? So from an injury like that, I just do not see him coming back and playing until then, which is, even that is playing it tight, I think. I mean, based on how it's going, we might play it safe and not even like use until the international break, and he can come back for the Brighton game. But that will be interesting to see. I also want to hear from you guys, like in terms of what you guys thought of all the business that went down yesterday. Not as much as perhaps we thought, right? I mean, this happens every freaking transfer window, but there were like 100 rumors floating around, and not a lot of them like landed after floating all that time. And then like weird things happening in the last second over here. So let's take a look at some of the headlines. Yeah, by the way, Batshuayi is joining Fenerbahce, so I don't know what to think about that. He did have a good spell at Beşiktaş in the Turkish league. It's not the Batshuayi that's in the Premier League, but still, it's one of those things. So I think one of the more interesting ones to me were all the business that Chelsea did, and well, including selling Batshuayi, I guess, to Fenerbahce. But I think the biggest one is Aubameyang coming back to Chelsea. I mean, that's just like an odd story. I mean, we know how the whole ordeal went with Arsenal. I think that was kind of like he didn't go along with what Arteta's plan was, and I mean they were like, well, that's just too freaking bad, and they kind of like mutually parted or whatever, and he goes to Barcelona and he does score goals there. I mean, the guy is a goal scorer. I just don't know. And he will still come and score goals. But I just don't understand what Chelsea is looking to do in that front line. I think they still want the target man that they did not get in Lukaku. Is Pierre that guy? I don't know. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. I think Sterling, like when you watch Chelsea, it's right now it does feel pretty like stagnant at attack, right? I mean, apart from when the ball goes to Sterling, there's no one else where they get the ball and you're like, okay, let's see if he creates something or let's see if he makes something happen. And so, like when I watched that Southampton game, it just did not feel like a team that's going to get goals easy if it's not for Sterling. So if you take Sterling out for some reason, and when you play so many games, you're not going to be able to trot out Sterling and have him walk around like that all over the place. And they do need other weapons, so it does make sense in that one. Zakaria they brought in from Juventus. That's another interesting one to me. I don't know if that kind of says a lot about Conte's injury and maybe other injuries anticipated and stuff like that, because they really bring somebody to a crowded parts of their midfield, which is interesting. But we know like Tuchel likes those players and he can never have enough of them. Like, the Kovacic, Eugenio, Conte, like those guys in the middle of the field. He likes having as many of those guys as possible because he can keep trotting them out there and have energy and legs out there. Ronaldo is staying at United. Watching that United game yesterday, and Jesus, by the way, not that we're bashing Brandon Rodgers, but I mean, that Leicester team just looks woeful. It just looks like a team. I don't know if yesterday midnight is that's what they needed, like the deadline, to hear that deadline go done, and now we can play or something. But it just feels like a bunch of guys just went out there like playing preseason. We're like, we're still getting ready, man, kind of a deal, and they're really digging themselves a big hole. I mean, at this point, forget about trying to go to Europe or anything like that. I mean, I don't think that's happening. Especially, I mean, forget the point difference, but in terms of what they have on the field and what they're doing. But I just don't understand why. Um, I mean, they're dead last, obviously, with 1 point, and there's like a bunch of teams with 3 points. So it's not like oh, it's too late for relegation. They're not digging themselves a hole in terms of that, but you're already like 8 points behind a European spots, and the way they're playing, the way that squad is built right now. But even within the way the squad is built, like I don't understand why you would play your probably best center of the field midfielder as a center back, but then have Soyuncu on the bench. Soyuncu, who at one point, was like one of the best center backs, like one of the best up and coming young center backs in the league. And, like rumors going that he's going to go here, he's going to go there and stuff like that. He has really dropped in form. I'll give Rogers that. I can tell you guys from like the Turkish national team too. It's not the same guy that he was, but gives some weird Klopp vibes where you play a defensive midfielder as center back, where you have a center back sitting on the bench. And he has been on that bench. It's not like, oh, he just came back from injury, he's not ready. He's been back on that bench for quite some time now. So he could have easily put him over there, took over that midfield. United did not look like, they had much either, but they got that goal. And, and yeah, I'm glad Alan brought that up in comments. Now, I was just reading that this morning. It's right there. This isn't the club it was 2 years ago, Brandon Rogers says. So that gives some awful Parker vibes, right? This morning, like they're like, what did Parker say to get canned? And he's like going through the old papers to see like what the quote was. He's like, I'll say something really similar. And says, we needed help and we haven't had it. And honestly, they've gotten the money and with Fofana and stuff, but I think they kind of dragged that too long too. I don't know if they wanted to hang on to Fofana or if it was just to get more money for Fofana. That was kind of like very poorly played because they did not give themselves enough time to make something out of that money. I know they brought a few players yesterday. They brought a center back in, but yeah, I mean, they could not make that much money. Ian, good morning, Ian. Ian says Rogers is the next sack manager. Yes, it's going to be a tight one. I'm hoping for a great Saturday where we put the nail in that coffin. But yeah, exactly right. Where's Mecca when you need him? Mecca is actually working the camera right now as we speak. I think because they're on air as well. But he's working. He's behind the camera. Chris says, sorry, I'm late. You are late. We called, we that roll call early and you missed it, Chris. Good morning. Thanks for joining. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that Rogers thing. I mean, right now, I know we don't want to, or, as fans of him, we don't want to admit it, but it's between him and Gerard, I would think, in terms of, and then obviously Fat Frank. But hey, he gets them, right? Like he gets them. So whatever that means, he'll be sticking around. I don't know if we win on Saturday, especially in kind of like a deciding fashion, like at Goodison on top of it. And they drop down because obviously if we beat them, unless both Wolves, Villa, well, and Leicester, which I mean is possible, I guess they all lose unless one of them, and then that will push Everton bottom to the relegation. And yeah, I don't know if he survives that. They do not get. I remember like looking at this for the Premier League show. We were talking about it in terms of like what they have coming, because after they play us, they go to Arsenal, who's obviously doing really well. So it's not like you don't expect them to pull up any points from there. Then they play West Ham at home. Then they go to Southampton, who can be, it's kind of like you don't know what you're gonna get. Southampton is like a box of chocolates at home. You can get like the really good Southampton, but you're gonna get a lot of efforts and work, and they have people who can like, they've made some additions as well that I think will really pay out for them. And then they play United, then they go to Tottenham, then they go to Newcastle, then Crystal Palace. I mean, you're talking like these are games like in October. I really do not see them racking up a lot of points from these games. And I know, this was the scenario last year where they got some weird games like against United at home and stuff like that. They stole some points from games that they weren't expected to. And that's kind of like how they ended up staying up. I don't know if he repeats that again against Arsenal. So if they lose tomorrow, they lose at Arsenal. You have West Ham, who's maybe waking up. And I think that's another team that will benefit from this transfer window being closed. Clear minds, better football kind of a deal. So you can see him like getting maybe 1 to 4 points out of these next 5-6 games. And that's goodbye for Fat Frank. Ian says, if we win 9-0, I mean, that would be a dream. I hate to say that. I mean, that would be a dream. I cannot stand
freaking Lampard. I think I made that pretty clear over time. So Chris Scott says Brandon and Frankie will get sacked together. Not that we're bashing on Brandon Rodgers here. That's Mecca's gig to bash on Rodgers. But I just like you watched that game yesterday, hoping they pull up something against a United team that does not look good. All that. And yeah, it just does not look like it's going to happen. And there's a lot of quality on that field. I mean, and it's quality that was playing really well before. Like Madison, Barnes, Vardy. And I know Vardy is aging, but it's still Vardy. Like if you get him into a situation, he's still going to finish. And he's still doing the work rate and stuff like that. But I think, people are getting smarter when they play against Vardy as well. And against teams that kind of can sit back, and by conceding, they let United be able to take back a little big too. And yeah, Chris says he's taking the same squad and regressed them. And that's like the odd thing. Yes, they've gotten worse. And obviously he's blaming that, you got to freshen up the squad by adding players that are better to improve people and to make everybody compete harder to earn their spot or whatever. And obviously that's his complaint, I think, is the fact that, they have not brought in anybody. So, that's why it's regressed. Not that we're bashing on Rodgers this morning, but this whole conversation started actually with, I digress, went all over the place. When I saw Brandon Rodgers' picture over there, I remember that quote that this isn't the club it was 2 years ago. Yes, you have regressed them. It isn't the club 2 years ago. But I think he means in terms of obviously ambition and, direction that they were headed and stuff. But Ronaldo's thing, seeing Ronaldo like come in, and it was late in the game. I can't remember when, but like 60, 70, somewhere around there. It has become a sad figure to look at. Not that I'm a Ronaldo fan and I was sad, but if you are a Ronaldo fan, it is a sad sight. It kind of reminds me of when we were watching Gerard over here with LA Galaxy. It was not as much of a joy to watch. It was more like it just kind of like pains you, like you almost want to look away a little bit. And that's what reminds me of. I mean, you got to figure, United has a good start now. And they did make some key additions. Let's see what happens. I still feel like they're one or two like poor results away from going back to the original default settings of full chaos. But obviously when you play Leicester City and they don't do anything, that doesn't help the cause. Chris says, why would he go? He's getting paid 500,000 for every 20. I don't think he's that kind of guy, and I really don't think that is as much of a motivation, like the money part of it. I think he would much rather get 300,000 or 200,000. We're making it sound like it's not a lot, but yeah, for him probably it's not. But and play at a team like Chelsea, I think he would much rather do that. Be in the Champions League, trying to go, get his records and all that kind of stuff. I think that's what he is more after than, I don't think he's happy collecting a paycheck sitting on the bench. I just don't think he's that kind of player. I do not like the dude overall, his antics and stuff like that, but I don't know if I want to say the word like, but in terms of, you got to maybe respect his drive overall. So because you do not get this good and you're not in this kind of a shape at his age. And I know he doesn't press on all that kind of stuff, but in terms of like physical shape, you do not get there by, just having the skill or whatever. It's a lot of drive. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment. And, it's being kind of like over the top focused on what you're doing. Some of these guys that are superstars for this long of a time. Sometimes you have a guy, right? Like he just like becomes a superstar. He's around for a couple of years. And you're like, man, this guy is so good. And then he kind of like fades away. And I think those are the guys that don't have that drive to keep them going like that. You look at any sport, like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. You hear some of the stories of him and the drive he had, despite being the best player at the time and maybe best player of all time, which I don't want to start that discussion now. But, he reminds me of a player like that, where you're not going to like him when you play against him, but you got to kind of still respect the drive the guy has. And I think he would much rather be in a team like Chelsea, playing in the Champions League. The Champions League, I think, is the biggest thing for him, and playing for the title. He has to know that this team is not title bound this year, one way or the other, United. And honestly, the way he is, I don't think he would be happy even if they were title bound, if that means he's coming off the bench for like 20 minutes. I think he's a little selfish in that sense as well. But most of these guys are. I mean, he probably looks at Messi, right? It's like him or Messi. It's all these guys like over the internet arguing over this over and over again. I just don't understand how you become somebody's like freaking spokesperson and make that your life. But you look at what he's got going in terms of being in PSG, surrounded by a ton of good players, probably going to get a bazillion goals in the league there, just adding numbers on numbers because he's playing in France. And he's over here playing 20 minutes at United. So he can't be too happy about that, despite the 500,000. I think we would probably be fine, Chris, with 500,000 and work 20 minutes. I'd go for that. I probably work 2 weeks, though. To be fair, I probably work 2 weeks and quit. I just take the million and take off, but that's probably just me. Villa playing City at the weekend. Yeah, Stevie G can't be confident. Stevie G should not be confident about anything really about that team right now. Again, this is going to be like an important weekend, I think, to see, or maybe like 2 weeks. These two weeks is going to be important to see what teams were kind of like not playing their best because there were not a lot of clear heads out on that field. I think that's something that I mention a lot, but I think it gets overlooked a lot by a lot of fans when, we see it here all the time in like American sports, like trade rumors and stuff like that. And after a trade deadline, those guys start playing totally different because their minds are clear now. They know where they're going to be. They either went whoever the hell they were going to be traded and or whatever. In this case, I mean, this is more, I think it's even more painful. Over the other one, you can be like, hey, I have no control over this in some ways where you're going to go. Obviously, some of the other guys do. But in the Premier League, you're like, are they going to sell me there? Like, especially like you're trying to go, they're kind of like holding you back from going because they're like, well, we'll see if we can get this guy. If we can get this guy, maybe we can sell him. And then, so there's so many moving parts. It has to be like occupying your mind and obviously affecting your play. So it's going to be interesting to see these next 2 weeks, which teams kind of play a lot better with clearer heads and which teams actually improve themselves with the people they added. I mean, Nottingham Forest added, what did I see? 22 people, I think it said. Yes, they break the record for most summer signings, 21 signings. I actually had a call in, but I don't think I would get the medical passed either way. So I could not get to be the 22nd signing, but like that's a lot of freaking signings. And you would think, I mean, 21 signings, some of them are going to be good and pay off, right? But that's way too many signings trying to work into a season that you did not start too bad, but you're still like, it's not like you started. Like you look at a team like Fulham where they got 8 points from their first 5 games, and if they slump and it was kind of like the initial excitement or initial coming to the Premier League rush, it would be interesting to see where they end up, but at least they built a cushion. Like 8 points is a decent cushion, knowing 3 points right now is the relegation zone. So I know it doesn't sound like 5 points a lot, but it is still 5 points. Does anyone know if Arsenal was successful in any of their transfer bids? Partey and El Neni are both injured. I did not see any. I don't think the Douglas Lewis thing ever happened because I did not see any headlines this morning or anything yesterday regarding it eventually passing through. It almost sounded like Villa was trying to milk the deal, trying to get more money out of it. Initially, like they wanted 40, Arsenal was offering 20, and then I don't think they ever met in the middle. I think Arsenal went up to 23 or something like that. And I don't know if Villa's like, I said 40, not 23 or something. I don't know, but I did not see a headline at all to see if they filled that slot. I mean, I don't know if El Neni is as much of a loss. They still have bodies. I don't know how long they're kind of like those two guys are out for, but can't be worse than our midfield. So tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I mean, I complain, but it's at least 6:30 for me. I know people who are listening or following us from the West Coast are probably like, "Go to hell!" It's 4:30 for me, but let's face it, 6:30 is pretty early to people. Uh, I never feel confident about these derby games. And honestly, our last run of games, I mean, Bournemouth. Okay, that was more like Bournemouth and Parker's gift, maybe his parting gifts on his way out as he got canned. But um, our play does not obviously help the confidence and be say, oh, we're gonna just like kill them, because there's so much more that goes into this game too, aside from the form on the field. And I just don't see a lot of our guys. I see too many of our guys that are not anywhere near their best. See, Ian is still back in the stomping grounds over there. You should be coming back soon, aren't you, Ian? You've been there a month, man. What kind of great vacation is this? I can use a vacation like this. Getting one next week, but nowhere near in Ian's realm of vacations. Only a few days here, but yeah, it's 13:30 for him. Yeah, 4:30 games has to be rough. I don't even know if I would go to bed. To be honest with you, watch a movie or something like that and go straight into the pre-match festivities. But I know what your guys' score predictions are. I am hoping to get a win out of this, like a 3-1 or a 2-1 win. But I think it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be an ugly one. It's going to be, seeing freaking Pickford kill time from like the second minute on, if not from the kickoff, is going to be frustrating. I just hope an early goal. If we get an early goal, I can see us demolishing them. I'll put that on the record now. But I don't know, if we do not get that early goal, it's going to be a long day. And they're going to do everything they can to keep that crowd in the game. And it's uh try to like slow the game down, interrupt the game. There'll be a lot of lying around and stuff like that. And I just hope, I don't know who the ref is for. I forgot to check before going on air, because that was something I was thinking about earlier. Let's hope it's something that the ref can kind of stop early in the game, because it seems to be a tactic that's done against us, against teams like City and stuff as well, teams that play with rhythm. Obviously, it's the only way to slow them down. I mean, Klopp was talking about it after the Newcastle game, in terms of it's hard to get into that rhythm and get things going when the play is stopping all the time, and when you're out of rhythm, you're losing the ball, and it's like rinse and repeat. So Mike Dean, ugh, that's all I gotta say. Ian says 2-0. Chris says 2-0. Hopefully after 15 minutes. That sounds even better for me. Yeah, I mean, Chris says Newcastle wasted almost 9 minutes in the second half against us. I expect Everton to one up that. I do too, sadly, and that's why it's going to be concerning. Alan is going with 2-1. Well, let's hope it's a freaking win either way. I don't want another Newcastle type of game where it's like to literally the last second, but I expect it to be tight because I don't know if we're going to get that early goal. But it's going to be interesting to see how Nunez is used. It's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the third person in midfield with Hendo out. So, I mean, does Jones get a look, or do we play it safe and put Milner out there, knowing this game is going to be a physical one? Cards and how they're used is going to be important in this game. So it's going to be an interesting one. Let's just hope we get 3 points. Even better, let's hope we just smash him and put Fat Frank in the unemployment line. But let's just get the 3 points. Fat Frank will eventually get him fired. I'm pretty confident about that. We don't have to do it ourselves. We can help. But that's going to happen either way. Let's just get the win and get the heck out of there. Like I say, we just got to make it till the end of this month with these injuries. And then you never know. You never know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this Newcastle game affects it. I never saw Bournemouth as a turning point. It was almost like a bit too easy. But the Newcastle win, especially the way it happened, it could be one of those things that, we look back on after, by me celebrating the title and say, that was the game. That freaking kick by Carvalho is what kicked off the season for us truly and won us the title. It's Friday, people. Let's be happy. Let's be hopeful. Hope you guys have a great weekend celebrating the Everton win. I'll see all you guys on Monday, or actually even in the post match. So join us then. Take care, everybody.